All right, we are back to talk about the 20th anniversary of the premiere of Lost, specifically the pilot, and some of the implications of this show for the future. Just a quick of the crash Lindelof and Carlton Cuse over those 6 seasons. Lost featured an innovative flashback and flash forward, eventually, story structures of the show, as well as look harder at the mystery in television. And Lost's sixth season finale remains one of the most discussed, divisive episodes of television in history. We'll get into certainly. I think that you and I both are fans of that finale, but just wanted to sort of ask your origin story with Lost. Were you there from the very beginning? Did you catch up at some point along the way after sort of the hype hit? How'd you start with Lost?
I got into it relatively early. I wasn't there at the very beginning, and I will throw the question back to you in a moment, but I'll answer more for myself first, I guess. Um, Season one was out on DVD, and I rented season one on DVD from a little local video store in Brooklyn, where I was living at the time, Borum Hill. I have no idea if that video store is still there. Likely it is not, right?
Likely
But
not.
but it was a cool little place, you know. They had like a little Criterion collection wall and stuff. But anyway, there was some hype around Lost already. Only one season existed. Some people were talking about it a bit. So I rented that first season on DVD, watched it, and then from there was in real time. What about you?
Yeah. Yeah, that actually is a similar story in that did not watch the first season in real time in October of 2005. So after the second season had started, I'm mentioned before, lived in Houston at the time. In October 2005, Hurricane Rita came through the Gulf and up into Houston. Everyone in Houston evacuated north. We were one of the living in the south. We got stuck in all the traffic after 15 and a half hours. We had made it about 45 miles north and decided we couldn't go anymore. So we pulled off with some family members that we were caravanning with to my sister-in-law's parents' house. And someone that was in that group had they brought with them the first season of Lost on DVDs. So we spent sort of our hunkered down during a hurricane time watching the first season of Lost. And that was, I mean, I was hooked from then on. So then it became sort of the scramble to find someone, anyone who had DVR'd the first few episodes of the second season so that we could catch up before whatever the next episode that was going to be on later in October so we could be sort of up to date with it. And as you can imagine, after the first season finale and the cliffhanger there, the scramble that we had to try to figure out what was going on, who had it, who could we watch it, because DVDs certainly weren't out yet. This was not, you could rent it from Netflix or Blockbuster yet. So yeah, it was something where we really had to work hard to find those first few episodes of season two.
That's wild. Such different times,
Yeah.
you know. Um, by the time Lost was over, Netflix streaming did exist.
Hmm.
I don't remember exactly when they launched it. It must have been 2008, 2009, somewhere in there. I
Yeah.
have to look it up. I didn't really plan on wanting to be able to say the year, but by the time Lost was over, I know it did exist. And then because I got really into this show, maybe not as much as some other people, maybe not as much as you, I don't know, but I was into it enough that before season six aired, I rewatched all five seasons
Mm.
on Netflix streaming, um, to prepare myself for the final season of the show.
Yeah, I'm pretty
Um,
sure I did the same, but with the DVDs. This was one of the few, if not the only show that there was a group of 14, 15 of us that watched this show together every time it came out. And, we at each other's houses just could not wait. We were pausing and rewind, all the things that you would do when you're with a group of people watching it. I sort of missed that experience because I don't know that I've ever had it since, but did, I believe, go back and watch all the DVDs before the sixth season aired.
yeah, I know a lot of people had that kind of experience where they'd have like Lost watch parties every
Yep.
week, which sounds pretty fun. I didn't really. I mean, I watched it with my girlfriend at the time. About it until the series finale when I did get together with a handful of there were four or five of us or whatever
Yeah.
who gathered to watch the finale of the show, and the room was mostly filled with disappointment, I will say. Um, which, and part of that was me. I mean, we'll talk about this. I think you briefly mentioned it already. In terms of the finale, I mean, the number of people out there who will say it's one of the worst finales ever. I mean, they're definitely out there. You'll kind of them on the internet.
Yeah.
Um, I can relate to that somewhat, but I came around on it ultimately.
Yeah.
For me, it was one of these when I originally watched it, I was kind of like, hmm. But then
Yeah.
thinking about it more, and then having done a rewatch of Lost once or twice since then,
Hmm.
I've really come around on the ending. What about you? Did you
Yeah.
like it
It was an
initially, or
it was an interesting experience watching the finale with that many people because it was like that many different emotions after it ended. Some people audibly groaning, some people, oh, see, they were dead the whole time. Some people, like me, I mean, weeping, crying at the end of it. I mean, it just was this spanned gambit of emotions. And I think I was more sad about like the sentimentality of it hadn't really hit me yet. I was more sad that it was over.
Mhm.
Um, but I did appreciate sort of the finality of it. So on the dial, I was more towards appreciating and enjoying the finale than I was the other side. And then since then, I've moved all the way, over to just thinking it's a masterful finale.
Yeah, I've gone more and more in that direction myself. I mean, I think for me, the big problem that I had was with almost the whole final season. Like I was already getting a little bit worried insofar as throughout the show you have the running theme, the kind of man of science, man of faith theme, right? But also in relation to the stuff happening on the island, where there would be a scientific explanation, which,
Yeah.
might not accord with real existing science entirely. That's not the point, but there's an attempt
Yes.
to, explain
Yes.
things in terms of electromagnetism or whatever weirdness, but
Yeah.
like plot, at least pseudoscientifically.
Right.
Um, and so the final season, mysticism in a way or something. And so that was part of what bothered me initially. But, one thing that really does bother me, it did from the very beginning, it are the people who say, oh, they were dead all along. It's like, no, that's precisely the opposite of that. Like,
Exactly.
did you pay
Exactly.
attention to um
This experience made them more alive than ever. I think you could be argued.
yeah, and I think it's interesting, at this point now in 2024, I've gotten a bit sick of like parallel universe stories. But
Same.
when Lost's final season was airing, no, I found this just incredibly intriguing. What's going on with the Flash Sideways, as we call it, and that's part of what brought me around personally was being able to kind of reconcile things on the quote unquote scientific side, not quite, but
Yeah.
because at the end of season 5, they blow up the island.
Right. Yeah.
So at the beginning of season 6, the plane never crashed, right? So it's like Juliet actually created an alternate reality. And then you've got to think about how the characters in the alternate realities relate to one another, or resonate with one another, or something like that. Um, but also, we can talk about that more if you want to.
Hmm.
The bigger thing is, I've what I really come around on is it's not the point.
Right. Exactly.
The point is in the characters.
Yes.
And I really love this article we have on the site from Hannah Searson. I don't know if you had a chance to read this,
Yeah.
of
This is the
Lost
one
True
I'm.
Constant with sentimentality.
Yeah, that really the story was always about their individual and collective journeys. And there were mysteries and unexplained things and who's on the other outrigger, which has never been answered, just as a sorry, that's a deep cut, but it's all sorts of questions and things that in the end were interesting, but it didn't really matter because what mattered was that these journeys met up in one point and they were able to continue the rest of it together. Yeah, it's a great piece on the idea of sentimentality.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I think that's right. I think it's a really good one. And then from that point of view, if we embrace that sentimentality, then this is where the finale of Lost really hits and lands in terms of the characters and how they relate to one another
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
emotion. It's
yeah.
emotionally.
Yeah, the
Very
idea that I mean,
satisfying.
so many important conversations and pieces of dialogue throughout this show, but that one at the very end about with Christian Shepherd telling Jack that the most important times you've had was the time you spent together, and just how many different layers there are to that one specific sentence. And it could have meant the time they spent on the island together. It could have meant what they have done in their lives since that time. It could have meant that they were all connected in some way, and it needed this experience to for them to find those things. Yeah, just so many different ways that they can find out that that important time was the time they spent together.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that bothered me, and the other thing that the thing that still bothers me a little bit is it doesn't really make sense that Christian's alive. What, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that was always, it's taken a long time for me to sort of reconcile the idea of how do we continue to see Christian. Obviously, I think when we saw him many times over the island, it was a representation of the smoke monster. Then you see him again, like on the boat in the season 4 finale when he tells Michael, okay, you can go now. You see him obviously again and several times throughout season 6. These are more the ethereal versions of Christian Shepherd, not the physical versions. And so, yeah, it was sort of this, how do we justify seeing him in all these different ways? But he was just more this compass than anything. When he wasn't the smoke monster, I guess I should say.
Right. I mean, but what stands out to me, I guess, in the Flash Sideways is if you want to interpret it in a kind of deflationary way,
Hmm.
metaphysically, right? Then you say, okay, well, because they blew up the island, then there's the alternate timeline where the plane doesn't crash, and then this is what's carrying that out. But he would still be dead,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Went and got his corpse, and it was in the coffin, and um, so, but it's okay. Again,
Yeah,
this isn't what's
yeah.
important. And what's
Yeah,
important
I
is
mean,
that
there are. It's
continuity.
funny is that you bring this up because there are so many important conversations that happen with Christian Shepherd at the center of them, and then it forces you to think, okay, well, who is he? What version of him is he right now? What are we seeing the physical or metaphysical version of Christian Shepherd? So yeah, it forces you to think that, but often the central themes of this show, even back in episode, I think it's 4 or 5 of season 1, White Rabbit, start with this Christian Shepherd sort of pushing them to do certain things.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess if you want to explain it, quote
Yeah.
unquote, explain it, I think you'd have to go in the direction of something like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Christian's soul was able to like jump around through alternate realities and interact with people or something,
Exactly.
you
Exactly.
know, and anyhow, I will at this point definitely defend the ending. And we meaningfully talking about what I put in our notes about this, what I had in mind when I asked you, do you even need to like it?
Mm,
But maybe we can interrogate that a little bit more in terms of thinking about the show overall.
yeah.
It seems like there are a lot of people who are really into the show, were disappointed in the ending, mad at the ending, and then don't like the show anymore. And I'm not sure if that makes sense. Like even if you take the point of view that the ending was bad,
Yeah.
would do you think that would wreck the show?
Yeah. I've always been fascinated with this debate about, I think that I can be comfortable with whether you think the ending is good or the ending is bad, as long as you understand what they were doing and don't
Mm-hmm.
misinterpret what they were trying to do there with the flash sideways and some of the things that they say throughout that sort of give this wink, wink, nod, nod to, uh, we were dead. I think there's actually a comment like that in the finale of like, we were always dead or something like that. As long as you understand what they were doing with that story, whether or not it landed with you, I can see either way, but just I think don't misinterpret what happened in your quest to find out whether you like it or not.
Yeah, I'm trying. I was trying to remember the line now. I have to look this up to refresh my memory. What you're referring to is something in
Yeah.
that conversation between Jack and Christian, but it's way more ambiguous than
Yes,
saying like,
certainly.
oh. But anyway, I mean, I guess what I would suggest, I don't know if anyone listening perhaps did watch Lost when it was airing, was disappointed in the ending,
Yeah.
thought that it wrecked the show, and has never returned to it. Return to it because I think particularly on a rewatch, the most recent time I rewatched the whole series personally was in 2020. It's just so good. the
Yeah,
structure of the episodes going back and forth between what's happening on the island
exactly.
and the flashbacks, or then ultimately flash forwards or flash sideways. We started with the flashbacks. The way that they employ that structure to deepen the characters and how we get to know these characters in a way where we have to be thinking about who they are on the island and who they were before they got to the island and how that
Yeah.
is the same person. I really do think gives a depth to the characters on this show that you don't get in a lot of places. And the episodes tend to be really quite entertaining too.
Yeah, I mean, just out starting with Walkabout and just the revelation of what, or what had happened to Locke before he arrived on the island,
Mhm.
to Sun and Jin, to, I mean, just the story of Sawyer leading into what happens at the brig in season 5, where he is able to confront the con man. I mean, just, and I'm trying to think if there was a show before Lost that really used flashbacks.
Anything to this level where, particularly because in most episodes, the flashbacks are all so it's like this is a
Yeah,
Sawyer episode.
right.
Well, Froger's in trouble. Um, sometimes they slipped in certain ways. I think that part of the ultimately kind of mixed reaction and or mixed kind of legacy of Lost might be in that it is the case that when the show was on, all kinds of stuff was going on in terms of engaging with the questions, engaging with the mysteries, looking at it as a kind of puzzle box, having
Yeah.
conversations around the water cooler, like what's going on with the
Yes.
polar bear and all of that. And that then if you're looking at it just from that point of view, like it's a puzzle to be solved, then maybe you end up being disappointed. But I would argue ultimately the show itself tells us that's not what it was ever about. It consistently answers a question while at the same time opening a larger question or mystery, such that you almost don't notice that it's answered some of the questions you used to be asking.
Yeah, that sort of duality there is something that I loved about the show, even in real time, that you would get answers to some of these scientific or non-scientific questions and mysteries that came up. But it's sort of the bigger question that wasn't inevitably answered till the end was, why these people and why now and why this experience? But all of that looking back at their lives and looking forward at what would come after the island sort of led to that the end of that journey. And so, yeah, again, just it became the most discussed, debated, paused, evaluated show that had ever existed on television. Um, but most of that conversation in the end was not to say it wasn't necessary, but it was not, I guess the that was not the finish line to answer all those questions.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page here,
Yeah.
and that's why I do recommend anyone who was into the show like that and then soured on it, if you haven't returned to it, I do think it's worth returning to. There's a lot of great stuff here. Personally, I love that structure we're talking about with the flashbacks, then the flash forwards, then the flash sideways.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with, have you ever checked out this internet project that they call Chronologically Lost?
Yes, I have watched most of Chronologically Lost. Find this very, very interesting. I mean, very ambitious project. So very happy to whoever it was. I didn't jot down who it was that put this together, but the Chronological Lost is I mean, you certainly need to do it after you watch the entire series.
Yeah.
It is, I think, quite expository in terms of understanding the timeline of events. It's sort of in the same vein. There are some recommendations I can certainly give if people want to watch the episode or the season 6 episode Across the Sea at a better time than when it actually is placed in the series. But yeah, this sort of chronology and why things happen in a certain way. It is a really cool companion to watching the show as it originally aired.
In chronological order, I mean, it's
Yeah, I
order.
mean, so it starts with across the sea, which happened whatever thousands of years ago, and then leads up to, say the timeline of the Black Rock back in the 19th century, leading up
Hmm.
to early days of Charles Widmore and the bomb, and then the beginning of the Dharma Initiative. Sort of have all of this explanation of things, and then you see things happen. So, like I said, it uncovers the mysteries before they're revealed on the show if you watch it that way. But
Yeah.
just sort of see, oh, I can understand how things happen and why things happen. It's an interesting, like I said, companion to
I am very intrigued by it.
it.
It's whether I have it in, because it's the whole show still, right?
Yes, it is the
So
whole
do I
show.
have all of those hours in me to rewatch Lost, but not really, you
Not really.
know. Particularly when, as I was just saying, part of what I always really enjoyed about Lost is the structure with the
Yeah,
flashbacks and
yeah.
everything. And plug another article on the site. I recommend on that note, I would check out Michael Suarez's article about Lost, how Lost structure expresses its themes.
Mm,
I think Michael does a really interesting job there, precisely of um teasing that out, I myself wrote something on season two of Lost, which is also on the site, and I thought that was really interesting. How in thinking about the whole season as an object, if that makes sense. But it really started to become clear to me. It was like, oh, this is what this season is about. That
yeah.
you can get the theme of the season itself, which I'd have to refresh my own memory on what I wrote, but I
And how I thought it's some of the best television ever. It is. I mean, I can't ever make up my mind from month to month what my favorite episodes are of the series, but certainly through the Looking Glass and sort of the resolution and then closing of one book and opening up another that provides is just fascinating television in my mind. But yeah, there were, whether it was through seasons, whether it was through arcs, there were always these themes that would be addressed. And it just it's how they were able to incorporate so many of those, I think, was just just nothing sort of brilliant to me.
yeah, agreed. Yeah, I was going to ask you what your favorite episodes of the series are, and then I remembered, well, you wrote this article about how
Yeah.
those episodes in season three are the greatest episodes in TV history. So like maybe those ones you would choose. Um, I think for personally, I think it's a difficult question. I've written on a few episodes on their own on the site, so those would probably stand out to me. Like whatever happened, happened. I wrote on that
Yeah.
one. I like that one a lot. I like all that stuff. I like that
Yeah.
season five stuff. Give me,
Yeah.
Sawyer and Juliet, together in the '60s. I'm there for it.
Yeah.
Those are two of my favorite characters, by the way. I don't know how much of a dark horse Juliet is as favorite Lost character, but I'm willing to stump
Yeah. Now
for
I've never heard
Juliet.
anybody say Juliet before, but I thought about this a lot, and I think it might be Sawyer is
Yeah, it
my
might be
favorite
Sawyer.
Lost character. I mean, he's just that arc, that character, things other than brilliant or masterful. I just think specifically what they did for him and to him is just incredible.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree. So if I'm honest, it's probably Sawyer, but I like to sort of stump for Juliet because I like
Yeah,
Juliet a lot, and I
yeah.
feel like other people not
My
so
wife
much.
and I agree on this that their relationship is, one of our favorite things ever that we've seen on television. But it's interesting to go back because I did a rewatch recently. When season four ends, Sawyer swims up to shore after he jumped off the helicopter, sees Juliet on the beach. That's clearly meant to sort of start putting them together. But it's
Yeah,
not until several episodes into season five that they're together.
yeah,
And then, by the finale, which is like what, an 18 episode season, I mean, you're like, their love is the greatest love that's existed in the history of the universe,
yeah,
it's incredible.
yeah. Pretty much. It's great. Least favorite character, Jack.
That's so funny you say that. Yeah.
um,
Our non-hero Jack, yes.
um, we were going to talk a little bit about how I guess their original plan was that Jack was going to die, and they were going to have Michael Keaton as Jack, and he was going to die in the pilot.
Yep. Yep.
Um, that would have been interesting, I guess. Um,
Michael Keaton, and he agreed to do it because it was a one episode or sort of 1 hour thing. And then it became, no, we need this sort of hero savior figure in our story. And he said, I can't commit to that. So backed out, gave it to Matthew Fox. He becomes Jack Shephard, and and we're off from there. But it's indicative of there was often sort of a building the Oceanic Flight 815 as it was flying with this show, right? I think the
Hmm.
initial show Bible did not have Locke being paralyzed in a wheelchair, but as they began to write that episode, they said, "Oh, look at the sort of dramatic take we can do with this and where we can take it narratively," and added that in. I mean, they just sort of left themselves open to those things throughout the show.
Yeah, personally, I think that's great. That's how TV
Yeah.
works. That's how TV should work.
Yep.
Um, and I think how the best TV generally does work. Of course, we know that there was, some toxicity and other
Hmm.
stuff in the writers' room here, and
Yeah.
we talked about that briefly before. And Mo
Yeah.
Ryan talks about in her book "Burn It Down" and so on. And we don't want to get. We're celebrating loss today, so that's just a
Yeah. Plenty of things
quick
out
note.
there.
We're
Yeah.
aware,
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
you
Yeah.
know. But it's talking about Jack though too. It's interesting because I really don't like him very much. I know some people do, but even though I don't, Lost would not be lost without Jack.
That's right. I mean,
And
100% right. Do you feel differently about him at the very end than you do through the first, 115 episodes of the series because of his sacrifice and the turn that he eventually makes, or is it he has sort of stayed at the bottom of the rankings for me the whole time?
I mean, it's tough. Like, what are we talking about? In terms of do I feel like I like the guy? Do I want to be his friend? Or I don't even know how to put this. No, not really. But he's got the character development that he goes through is good, and the ending is effective to me. But it's partly effective along the lines of feeling like, oh, this numbskull finally got it or something. And so, in some ways, he had to be the kind of
I think that's true. Leader of the island, but then decided to sacrifice himself for the sake of it, and it just seemed like he was always looking out for his own best interest until that very last few minutes of the series.
yeah. Well, I mean, he was also a leader, and the group needed a leader, and there's a certain personality style that you have to be in order to be a leader. I think, particularly in circumstances like that. And it's not necessarily the kind of person I like the most in the world, but I get it,
Yeah,
right? Like, I get that it wouldn't be me,
yeah,
like,
it's the same.
honestly, I don't know, more like Hurley or something, like, I don't, what's going on? I've
And
got some
you
concerns.
and you'd inherit the island in the end. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. I did think it was really interesting what they did with Ana Lucia. I don't know how much we want to talk about this, but some of that stuff I feel like got, you're talking about how the extent to which they were writing the show on the fly.
Yeah.
But with Ana Lucia also, I thought it was drawing a really interesting contrast between different leadership styles.
Hmm.
Um, and I was always more sympathetic to Ana Lucia than it seemed like a lot of people were.
Yeah. I
I don't
certainly
know
was.
either.
I certainly was too. And I often think that her introduction, this is not about her leadership style, but her introduction is an underrated part of that season one finale. Obviously, the three-part finale in season one is we're launching the raft, Walt is kidnapped, we're blowing open the hatch, the smoke is coming up, right? It's all these things. And then you get in a very quick flashback scene, Jack and Anna Lucia, and that's it. So that's
Right.
also introducing something that's still to come. So that was more of the mystery of what's, and so often an underrated part of that first season finale to me.
Yeah. So on that front, um, you've got a list, favorite season finales, you've got
Uh,
rankings.
I do. I have a I won't say it's indisputable, but I think over time it's become indisputable to me what the rankings are. I'll
Worst to best.
start from worst to best. Let's say two is the worst. Two is the Walt and Michael get to leave. Jack and Sawyer and Kate are kidnapped. We see that Ben's the
Mhm.
leader of the others. That to me is the worst. Then I'm gonna go with not for the what the finality is of the show, but just for the actual finale, I'm going to go six,
Okay.
and then I'm going to go. Then I'm going to go. Let's see. Ooh, this is where
I
it
thought you
gets
had this worked out
tough now.
beforehand.
I did, but now I'm debating between two. Now I'm debating between two. Okay, so we're gonna go. We're gonna go two. We're gonna go six. We're gonna go five, four, one, three. That's from worst to
Five,
best.
four, one, three.
Yes. So
Five is when Juliet blows up the bomb.
the incident, which is fantastic. But you have to put it somewhere amongst. So the incident through the
Yeah.
looking glass with Charlie, not Penny's boat. We have to go back. The you know the three-part finale for season two, or sorry, season one when they launched the raft, blow the hatch, et cetera, et cetera. And then really underrated season four when there's the boat. They have to, they finally fly off the island, but then the boat explodes, so they have to fly back. The island disappears. Penny finds them. That to me is maybe the most underrated of the six finales.
Interesting. Maybe the most underrated. So your rankings again were I
Okay,
lost
so
track.
three,
Two,
three
three.
from best to worst now.
Okay.
Three, one,
All right.
4, 5.
I'll accept it. I mean, one's definitely up there. Three is with Charlie, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
so that it's hard to beat that. The end of one is definitely really good. We talked about it on the podcast before. It was on your
that's right.
Mount Rushmore of
That's right. That's
episodes.
right.
So how does that fit
Yeah,
together,
I've
right?
re-chiseled it to put
How
to
does
go to
that fit
episode
together?
three.
Sorry, I just tapped my microphone accidentally. But that's quite good. They find the hatch, right, and all of that. Um, so I'm with you. I've got very few quibbles here. I don't know. It's hard because if you want to move something up in the rankings, you have to move something else down in the rankings.
Exactly. With only six, it's tough to maneuver them. And I don't put six, the series finale, in the fifth position because it's a bad finale. But there's just so many oh my Lord moments in the others that just sort of shocking things as opposed to resolution as
Yeah.
we have in the series finale. Yeah.
I'm tempted to try to get five higher, right? Because I mean, we were just talking about Sawyer and Juliet,
Yeah. I
and
can
this
certainly
is
see switching.
Juliet banging on the bomb,
Yeah,
right?
I would be happy with a 3-1-5 as the top three as well. I just personally like it four quite a bit.
I'll do that for my personal rankings.
Yeah.
I'll go 3-1-5-4,
Okay,
6,
then two. Yeah,
2.
two is the most
Oh, and it's
anticlimactic.
just I don't know. Yeah, I wrote that article on season two, and considering season two as a whole, I think it's very, very good season of television.
Yes, it
You have
is.
to think
It
about
is.
how coming out of season one, we hadn't even met the others yet. We
That's right.
hadn't even
That's
met
right.
Desmond yet, right? Like I'd be tempted to say almost like season two is when Lost became Lost.
Yeah, yeah. No, it really is. I mean, you're introduced to the far corners of the island, the different factions of who's going to be there, Tailies, others, Desmond. We sort of hear about Penny and Widmore for the first time. So yeah, I mean, it's where,
This way.
yeah,
But I mean, of course, you have to remember, right? The first time around, we didn't really know.
yeah, exactly. This big mystery for like 5 or 6 episodes of who he is.
Are we suspicious of him or not? And of course, we're
Exactly.
suspicious of him, but should we be? And how much of the stuff around, going back to this briefly before we're done here, which I think is a term that's totally fallen off. No one says
Yeah,
that.
when you used to be able to create mobile episodes that you could watch on your device. Yeah,
This is before the TikTok.
right.
But if it were now, it'd be like, hey, there's TikTok videos, or
Exactly.
something.
Exactly.
The message boards. There was some other stuff. There were games. There were books.
Yes. Yes.
I didn't engage in all this stuff all that much myself. What about you?
Anything that was online, I devoured it. The little extra episodes, message boards, people that had drawn the map and put it up, on a website. There were some virtual games, I think. I did go through a couple of the books that were featured on the show. I did not get into the books that were written and published as these are ancillary stories about other characters you haven't seen on the show, right? So there were several of those that were
Hmm.
written. Then there was Bad Twin, which was a book supposedly written by someone who was on the
Oh, the guy.
island and published after his death.
Hmm.
So I didn't get into those, but I did get into some of we're reading I forget. I'm just drawing a blank. Fahrenheit 451, or we're reading Fountainhead, or whatever it is that Sawyer was reading that, in the moment. We get into some of those and check them back out
Oh,
again.
you did some of that. You were taking
Yeah.
like reading recommendations from Sawyer.
Yes. Yeah.
That's hilarious. That's great. That's great. I didn't do. I mean, it's really striking to me now thinking back, um, how little I did. I mean, some online stuff, sure, but not a ton, um, comparatively.
Yeah.
But particularly compared to what I did when Twin Peaks came back in 2017, which kind of led us to where we are right now, Ryan, with TV Obsessive existing, and all of that, like the amount of stuff that I did then. But Lost was one of the first shows where that was kind of a real thing. I mean, in fairness to
Yes.
news groups in the 1990s and Usenet and all of that,
Yeah. Yeah.
Lost really kind of lit a spark. Um,
Yeah. It
Pre-social media
was.
days, meaningfully, but
Yeah. It just hit at the right time, right? We didn't have much, if any, social media, at least for the first few seasons of this show. So you really had to rely on these, like, as you said, message boards and forums, and any place you could devour content. They set up obviously websites that would connect to certain things, but it sort of became a puzzle and a game to go find these things and devour these things and look at the fake Oceanic 815 or Oceanic website where if you poked around, you could find things out about different people. And so it really was on the sort of leading edge of a lot of that stuff, which would become just the overwhelming influx of information we have now for shows that exist on social media and online, all of this. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do recall talking a bit about it on Facebook and stuff like that. So exactly where the years line up. At the very beginning,
Yeah.
I don't know. And Twitter certainly existed. Stuff existed certainly by the end when Lost ended in 2010. Um,
Yeah, we're
but
really sort of starting to take off with social media then, certainly with web content. The Office did some of these web episodes. The other shows were picking up on it as well. So yeah, it really became a part of I think that's sort of the traditional popular television. But yeah, there wasn't much of this before Lost.
yeah, I mean, I would appreciate if more shows did more of this stuff. I guess
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yellow Jackets has done a little bit,
they have.
a
Yeah,
little bit. Which of course I feel like that show owes a lot to Lost. If we're talking about
it
the
does.
legacy of Lost,
It does.
um, that gets in there, and I don't know what else. All sorts of things, really. I mean, I think
Yeah.
it is a significant show in TV history.
So do you think, considering how much it's influenced and how much we see things get rebooted and revisited and rethought, do you think we'll ever see more Lost canon content?
No, I don't think. I don't know if I think we should.
I don't think we should either.
Okay, we're agreed on that.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean I don't think we will, because I mean
Mm,
the ABC executives will do anything to make money, but whether we should, I feel pretty confident that we we should live with what we've got.
special, the Michael story,
Right.
a lost limited series event. I don't know if they made something, I'd watch it.
Yeah,
That's
I
part of the
know. I
problem.
know.
But I mean, I presume you've seen, New Man in Charge and all of that, and meaningfully stuff is just kind of it feels wrapped up, I guess. So
Yeah, it does. If it does feel incredibly wrapped up, the things that are left undone are fine. They're not going to contribute meaningfully to what we already know. So, yeah, I'm good with it.
yeah, same.
So,
We can always revisit it. You know,
another 20 years from now,
you have to go back.
I have to go back. Just
Um,
I appreciate the indulgence. I've said many times this is my favorite show. It's head and shoulders above any other show. So I just love any other chance we get to talk about it.
yeah, man, and I love this show too, and we've talked about this, and I'm well aware that while I'm not going to say it's my favorite show, the ones that I'm going to be ranking above it, you haven't seen. So, like, what are you doing?
Okay,
Do
so
you not value my
besides Twin
opinions?
Peaks, what else were you ranking about it?
Probably The Sopranos
Okay,
and maybe The Wire.
okay. I have
Those are the three that I had in mind.
I have committed to myself this week. I actually downloaded it to watch on a plane yesterday, but didn't get to it. I've committed to starting Sopranos. So I think this weekend is the weekend to do it. So
Cool. We'll
here
have to
we
talk
here we
about it.
go. Here we
We'll have to
go.
talk about it. What about, have you seen The Leftovers? You've seen The Leftovers, haven't you?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes.
That's one.
Let the
It's
mystery be.
it's such a hard question if you get into the space of like, what are your five favorite TV shows ever? Like if
Yeah,
you really try to limit it to five,
yeah,
boy,
yeah,
I do struggle,
yeah. I do
because it's
too.
like I
I do
want to get
too.
the Leftovers on that list. I want to get Lost on that list. I
Well,
almost can't
double
do a list of
recommendation. If
five.
you liked Lost, and you haven't seen The Leftovers, watch those 3 seasons. They're incredible.
Definitely. And then you can read my series of articles on The Leftovers on tvobsessive.com also. I'm really, like of all the stuff I've written over the years, that I might be almost the proudest of that stuff. And I don't know how much people read it. It's sitting there,
Oh,
from stuff
all
I
right. Well,
wrote
I'm
like
gonna go read it this weekend. I haven't read
five
that
years
yet.
ago. Yeah, okay. I
I've seen the
did
show, but I haven't read your stuff.
the way I approached Leftovers was by character,
Okay, good.
basically. So
That's a good way. That's a good way to do it. That's the way I've enjoyed doing it for shows like White Lotus and others. I think that's a really strong way to approach that show.
yeah. I agree, obviously that's what I did. Love The Leftovers, love Lost. Thanks for listening. Hopefully you all enjoyed this. If you haven't seen Lost in a while, hopefully you're feeling inspired to go put it down. I know I sort of am now after we've been talking
Yeah.
about it. Um, and if you enjoyed the podcast, please do leave a good rating, leave a good review, give a thumbs up on the YouTube if you're on the YouTube, or hit the subscribe button there. Follow TV Obsessive on social media. Check out tvobsessive.com. There's really kind of a bunch of articles on Lost on there. We mentioned a few of them.
Yeah.
There are many more. We've got at least a couple dozen, I'd have to check the number, articles on Lost on the site. We're going to come back next week, and our plan is
Yes.
to start talking about a show that we've mentioned, that we've been looking forward to, from Duplass Brothers Productions. This Penelope show
Yes.
that they independently produce is coming to Netflix on September 24th. So we're planning to spend a couple weeks on it, right? Like we'll do the first half next week, and
Yeah. I'd say let's do the first half next week, and then the second week we'll finish it up.
yeah, okay, cool. So hopefully it's good. We haven't seen it yet,
I know.
but if you
Or
want
we'll
to,
pivot one way or the other.
if we start watching it, we're like, nah. But I mean, I have confidence in the Duplass Brothers
Yeah.
production,
Yeah.
that it will be worth our time. So if you want to watch along with us, first half of Penelope prior to next Friday, and we'll be back then. And hope you join us. So see you next week.
All right. See you then.